It's a rare breed thing.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. You put on that weed. Come on, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Who got a lighter? Who got a lighter? Who got a lighter? Who got a cigarette lighter? Yeah, everything good.
Waiting for the mothership to take me home, a father. My mind is pretty cluttered, but it seems a little calmer. Just to think I had these thoughts after eating ramen. Still at grandma crib in the bed getting blunted. Still at grandma crib in the bed getting blunted. Still at grandma crib in the bed getting blunted. Still at grandma crib in the bed getting blunted. Still at grandma crib in the bed getting blunted. Ayy, sliding around the 305, looking for a ramen spot. Asian bitch named Tokyo took me to her grandma's house, and that shit was so fire. I took her about to show I'm proud. She pulled me to the back, said to roll the loud about the pound. She thought that I was deaf. I'm already high up on the cloud, but no, I can't stop now. I don't think that I am coming down. I wanna leave this planet, cause this world is full of fucking clowns. And no, I'm not entertained. Hell no, I cannot crack a smile. Waiting for the mothership to take me home, a father. My mind is pretty cluttered, but it seems a little calmer. Just to think I had these thoughts after eating ramen. Still at grandma crib in the back getting blunted.
What I said. Thought of them. Yeah, we need to tell them nigga what they say they're from out of town or whatever. We don't give a fuck. The deal is done. Now the cake been baked. They need to come on with the drama, whatever they gonna do. Other than that, fuck them. We ball. We ball.
What it do, y'all? It is something you agree. It's happening one time for your mind right now. Not really to you, know that. On how you're learning, you did. And today, y'all see the title. Michael, Malcolm X's Revenge, you did. This is young PHARAOH, the young guy I've been tapping into, getting around with, honestly, because he's very intelligent. And he's pretty much going to be exposing the Nation of Islam. So all you know what I'm saying? How niggas that followers like to follow behind shit. They like to brainwash you, consume all your energy and shit like that. And it's for you, dig? And without further ado, hold up, let me pull this shit up. Forgot to even pull this shit up. I was so ready to bring it to you. But it's gonna be right here. Yeah. Hope y'all ready to get enlightened. If not, I'll never tell you. But let's get into it. I'll be in the chat.
Peace, family. Welcome to my documentary titled The Nation of Islam Exposed, Malcolm X's Revenge. In this presentation, I'm going to be delivering hardcore facts. And before I even get to, the bulk of this subject, let me just give y'all a quick understanding of what's leading my spirit to do this, and even, the title. The documentary is titled Malcolm X's Revenge because, as I'm going to prove beyond any doubt, not even reasonable doubt, but just doubt, period, Malcolm X was assassinated, if not by, then with the aid of the Nation of Islam, due to him finding out that Elijah Muhammad impregnated 6 to 9 underage girls. And by underage, I do mean underage, not 21, not 20, not 9. I mean 17, 16, 15, those age ranges. Age ranges. And when he went on to tell the public this, Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, had Malcolm X assassinated. So these words are going to be coming from Malcolm X's mouth himself. So, I don't want anybody to ever say that this is hearsay, that this is slander, that I'm lying on the Nation of Islam. This is what Malcolm X said out of his own mouth multiple times. And this also was confirmed by Elijah Muhammad himself. Elijah Muhammad admitted to Malcolm X that this was true. Malcolm X personally met the children fathered by Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace, also confirmed these allegations, not only to Malcolm, but with his father, whom them both together on 2 different occasions confirmed this with Malcolm X. And so, there will be nothing but facts, that crack you niggas' backs today. And so, with that being said, let me let y'all know that I feel a deep mourning for Malcolm X, because I can only imagine at that time period when racial tension was at a such, inflated state. You got a black man like Malcolm X who, he didn't know everything, but he knew what he had to, and his moral compass was definitely on point. So you had a guy like Malcolm X who, he's kind of in the middle. He's dealing with a certain aspect of America which is highly racist at the time, and he's doing what he thinks is righteous for his people, only to find out that his people are on the same level, if not worse, than the same group of other people in America that they're calling the devil. In this case, we're referring to Caucasians. And so I can only imagine how Malcolm X felt fighting racism. Meanwhile, his house was being firebombed by black people while his children was in there. And so one of the most iconic images of Malcolm X that we all love that image of him looking out that window with that assault rifle in his hand. And black people love to take pride in that image because it makes you feel like he's standing up to the white man. But nobody want to admit that he was waiting on a black man. And so, what's scary, and another reason why this documentary needs to be done is because black people have a problem. We have a problem that we don't want to address, and it's time to address it. And what is that problem? I like to call it nigger privilege. That's the term I coined it. And so let me, explain what nigger privilege is really quickly. But first, I got to explain what white privilege is. What is white privilege? White privilege is when white people can pick and choose when they want to be blind, unaware, or oblivious to the advantages that, if not they themselves, their forefathers or their current peers have put them in this country, meanwhile looking down on other what you would call ethnic minority groups in regards to why we're not achieving success at their same level. Let me give you an example of this. There was something called redlining that happened in the 1900s, where the U.S. government, aka white people, so I don't want anybody to think I'm being racist, but I have to call it like it is. The U.S. government, aka white people, lowered the property values in certain communities. They allowed all of the wealthy whites to go in there and buy the property, aka the real estate, and then they just inflated the price crazy high, as well as instituted banking laws to where it would be harder for black and Hispanic people to get home loans. So not only weren't we allowed to, work equally paying jobs as them, we couldn't get a home loan, and we no longer were homeowners because they came and bought all of our grandparents' homes. And so redlining was so critical that it still affects us to this day as far as being able to be a homeowner. If you live in an inner city or you live in a certain part of your city that's predominantly black or Hispanic, that the property value or the real estate value is not always in the same margin as a suburban type estate or property. And so now, bringing this up to date, black people or Hispanic people or minorities in America, we're worrying about just paying our rent. We don't get to wake up and just feel like I have a home and, you know, I have somewhere to live. We got to worry about making a living while worrying about making sure that we have somewhere to live. And so referring this back to white privilege, a white person may wake up and go to their home every day that they own, whether it be a big house or a small house. And they can look at blacks and Hispanics and say, well, why all these people live in the projects? Why all these people live in apartment complexes? Why are they not working hard enough to be homeowners? Meanwhile, they get to ignore the fact that the potential for us to be homeowners, that carpet was snatched from under our feet a long time ago. So now that you understand what white privilege is, aka ignoring the evils of your peer group, now you're going to come into the understanding of what nigger privilege is or black privilege is. Black privilege is the same exact thing, except the script is flipped. Instead of black people, in this instance, ignoring the evils that their peers have done to other people, we're ignoring the evils that we've done to ourselves. So white privilege is when white people ignore the evil things they've done on this planet to everybody else and use that alleged ignorance as an excuse to look down on you for not being where they are in life when they clearly gave themselves a head start. Black privilege is when black people ignore the evil shit that we do to each other in the name of black unity, being pro-black, or whatever you want to call it. And so let me give my disclaimer really quickly. I love being black. Doesn't make me racist. I just love being me, just like everybody else should love being them. So if you're Chinese and you love Chinese history, I would never say that you're racist or, you know, it's something wrong with you being pro what your ancestors left for you. Same thing for white people, same thing for Spanish people, same thing for, you know, any other ethnicity group on the planet Earth. So when it comes to black people, we were infiltrated with wickedness. And what I mean by that is you got people today using black history and black culture. Meanwhile, they never read a book. They never care. They never do anything to support the internal infrastructure of the black community, but they want to use it when it's convenient to their follies and their plots. What do I mean by that? Coming back to nigger privilege. A black person can be doing something wicked, such as the Nation of Islam. And you have black people, I've had black people personally tell me, well, you know, don't say nothing because the white man is looking. The enemy is looking. Don't put our business in the street, or don't call this black person out because, you know, black unity, we supposed to come together. First of all, and these are not my personal thoughts and opinions, I'm staying within the context of the teachings of the Nation of Islam, who do teach that the white man is the devil. So if the Nation of Islam is saying that the white man is the devil, and the Nation of Islam is doing the same exact thing as the person that they're calling, they're doing the same exact things as the person that they're accusing of doing, if not on the worst level, why would I not be able to speak on that if my community is supposed to be honestly developing to a more positive standpoint? So let me give you another example of people using black culture to, you know, further their wicked folly. You have things like no snitching in the black community, right? Now, at one point in time, we understand that police in the black community had a very horrible relationship. I'm not saying we got a good one now, but we understand it was way worse. So we know the history of policing. We know that it comes from slave patrol, and then once slavery was commercialized and everybody was turned into slaves via what you call, you know, alleged citizenship, and police are policy enforcers. You know, they police statutes and policies of a business. Hence, we have a president. The only time you're ever going to see the president as the head of an entity is when you open a business. So anybody who owns their own business, myself included, you know, you got to make yourself the CEO and the president. So, you know, anywhere you go, hence, aka Europe, you know, they deal with queenhood or kinghood. Europe doesn't have a president. So the reason I'm giving you the brief background of this country is so you can understand how far we've come. But understanding that and bringing it back to where we are, okay, we understand at one point in time it wasn't good to talk to police. But then black people started to do something which was called Acts for Civil Rights, right? So we spend all this time fighting for civil rights, fighting for the alleged inclination to be equal. Then we get civil rights. And what do? We do a total 360, okay? Rosa Parks went to the back of the bus. Refused to go to the to sit in the back of the bus, right? And we feel like that's a trophy. Do you know what people do now when they get on the bus? Go right to the back. So that might seem like a small level of, that's not really that serious. It is that serious. Because why the hell does this woman have to go to jail and put her life in a threatening position for you to just get your ignorant ass up today and go right to the spot on the bus that you celebrate her every February for not going to? Now take that and put that on a higher perspective. Black people did march, they withstood racism, they withstood physical abuse, long hours of marching, protesting, praising, trying to stay nonviolent. I don't agree with everything Martin Luther King did, but I'm not going to undermine his movement. And then you got somebody like the Nation of Islam who comes and almost single-handedly convinces black people not to engage in the benefits that they just fought for. What do I mean by that? Boom, you get civil rights, equal rights. Now you can go get that federal job that you want. Now you can go seek government employment. Now you can go become a police officer. Now you can go do the things that you want to do, maybe not completely because racism systematically is still in effect, but you're in a more comfortable position than you previously were. So now here's where the no snitching comes in as far as being manipulated when it's convenient to people who want to use black culture as an excuse or a smoke bomb. It's kind of like when Batman throw that smoke bomb on the ground and just disappears. Like people be doing craziness, and then when you catch them, they throw the black power smoke bomb on the ground and try to disappear. And so here's where no snitching comes in. We fought all of this time to become district attorneys, lawyers, judges, etc. Then you got somebody like Farrakhan who could come say, don't work for no white man. The white man is the devil, blocka, blocka, blocka. And he just convinced maybe 2 to 3 to 4 generations of not going to even try to fulfill the job positions that they just fought for. So when you get out here in the world and you see, damn, why is not enough black police? Damn, why is not enough black people going to become district attorneys? Why is not enough black FBI agents? Okay? You can thank the Nation of Islam for being a part of that. Because the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, okay, specifically, helped to influence non-productiveness in society within the black community. And so, me personally, I'm definitely from the black community. Nobody's going to tell me any different. I grew up in the ghettoest of the ghetto you can grow up. And I've personally heard black people use the excuses like, I don't want to work for no white man, as an excuse to not be productive. And so here's the thing. Yes, you should always try to be an entrepreneur. I encourage every black person out there to go and try to get it for themselves because we got a harder time than anybody. But we're not going to use black history and black struggle as an excuse when it's convenient to be lazy. So if you're sitting in the house all day on the couch, you got children and a woman to feed, I'm assuming, okay? As much as you don't want to go work for no white man, I'm telling you now, I'll be the first person with an application at McDonald's if I'm ever in that position because I have children to feed. So you have 2 to 3 to maybe 4 generations of black people whose willpower or the potential to have an influence on the community in some kind of way was never utilized because of rhetoric that Louis Farrakhan himself doesn't even follow. Now, what do I mean by that, right? The Washington Times previously posted an article on how Louis Farrakhan, since 2008, has contracted more than $360,000 from the FBI for, alleged prison programs, that he's running to help inmates. Now, here's my thing. I don't see the fruits of that program, but I'm not going to judge it. But what I will say is this. Perfect example of what I'm talking about. You got a man that will sit here and tell you not to go work for no white man. The white man is the devil. Convince you and the men of your household and the men of your infrastructure not to go become no police, okay? Not to deal with police, not to deal in law enforcement. But yet, under the table, unbeknownst to you, he's getting paid by this same white man he calls the devil. He's getting paid by this same law enforcement agency he telling you not to talk to, okay? And the black community demonizes you if you talk to police in any kind of way, or if you want to aspire to become a police officer, you want to aspire to become a district attorney. Everybody knows that's not happening. You get demonized immediately. So this same man who put out this demonizing rhetoric has been financially benefiting from the same person that he told you not to benefit from. And so the point I'm trying to make is, people don't say what they feel. They say what's convenient to what they want you to feel at the time, so that they can finesse you out your life and finesse you out your wallet. And so coming into the Nation of Islam, okay, we're gonna be touching on a lot of subjects in this documentary, and I'm gonna be going, through the chain of command. And first and foremost, we want to talk about the history of Islam, okay? Because I don't want people to think that I'm attacking anyone's religion, but I'm not defending your religion either, okay? If it's true, it's true, and we're gonna put the facts on the table as they present themselves. When it comes to being a Muslim, okay, Islam for black people is probably worse than Christianity for black people, okay? Now, I know that people love to talk about white Jesus and, the Atlantic slave trade and slavery, and, they beat that into our ancestors. I don't understand why everybody glosses over the Arabic slave trade, okay? And so let me give y'all a brief history of Islam. And the reason I'm breaking down, the brief history of Islam is so that people can have a full understanding on how black people became Muslims, okay? And this has also been confirmed by, someone named Muhammad al-Arifi, who's, considered a world Muslim scholar. He's, associated with the World Muslim League Association. And he was quoted, saying that, black people were, and I'm just paraphrasing here, that they were cowardly, that we were dogs, that, Islam is not really for black people, and that we were converted by the sword. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is, not to inflate any racial tension between blacks and Arabs, but to let you know that this is how Arab people feel, and this is how they think. And this also, the history of Islam is going to be important as well, because it's going to, I'm going to make a distinction between, the Orthodox, unorthodox Muslim in the Nation of Islam and, their beliefs. Because, Muslims, they feel that Muhammad is the last prophet and that you must, pledge your allegiance to Muhammad in Allah, long story short. But the Nation of Islam teaches that W.D. PHARAOH was Allah in the flesh, and that Elijah Muhammad is the prophet. And so, that don't fly over there in the Middle East. So, Muhammad had to be on a platter if he would have went to the Middle East talking that. But continuing on, so in 100 AD, right, you have the trans-Saharan slave trade, okay? And this is where Arabs, okay, before they were Muslims, okay, or fully, the Islamic religion was fully established, came into Africa, and there's an estimated 40 million Africans who were involved in this slave trade, whether they were killed, traded, etc. So this is 100 AD. This is about 2,000 years ago from today. So this is the first slave trade ever in history, okay? So people just skip this slave trade. And so I'm not making any excuses for white people's slave trade or the European slave trade. But I have to even show you how white people even got involved, okay? So the Arabic slave trade started in 100 AD. It's still going on today. Yes, they're still in Libya trading black African people. Yes, they're still in Africa slave trading black African people and torturing black African people. So it has not stopped. So the Arabic world has been enslaving black people consciously on this planet Earth since 100 AD. So, like I said, I'm not toning down white people's slavery. But when people keep, bringing up slavery, talking about 400 years, I think 2,000 years of slavery, which is still active, is way more crucial than a 400-year period of slavery, which is, active systematically, but not, you're not just going to go outside and see somebody getting whipped and picking cotton out. They take you to jail. We know that, 1/5 of the world's prisons is here in America. 12% of nonviolent crimes is committed by black people, yet over 70% of the prison, industry is, filled with black prisoners. So that's systematic racism. Yes, that does exist. But when we talking about, I've showed videos of Muslims, in 2013 hanging a Ethiopian maid from the ceiling in their house by a rope and literally beating her, and they beat her so bad that she committed suicide a few, moments after the beating. And so, this type of stuff is really still happening out in the open, and it's okay. And so, coming back on point, about 100 AD, Muslims started what you call the Arabic slave trade. I encourage everybody to go look it up. It never stopped. It's still going on today. But they were responsible for the brutality of over 40 million African people. And so the Muslim slave trade carried on all the way up until the Portuguese got involved. And so the Portuguese, so that we can be distinct here, okay? A Spanish person today is not what a Spanish person was back then, okay? And the reason I have to break this down is so that, we're not blaming anybody for something they didn't do. I don't want people, don't be yelling at our Puerto Rican family out there. We ain't talking about them. But a Spaniard back then was a Caucasian person who spoke Spanish, okay? We know that Spanish was created in Italy, okay, etc. Catholic Church was using that Latin Vulgate, okay? And so with that being said, if you live in, like Central America, South America, the islands, and you speak Spanish, specifically the Dominican Republic, which was the first slave plantation established by Christopher Columbus and his son, okay, because he never made it over here. His partner, Amerigo Vespucci, hence the Hispanic name of Amerigo, made it to America, and so America is named after Amerigo. But Christopher Columbus, other people like Sir Francis Drake, who was also a Spaniard, spoke Spanish. They enslaved the entire Western Hemisphere. And this is how we have our Spanish people today. This is how we have our Afro-Latinas, our Latinas. This is how we speak Spanish. So the same way that I speak English is the same way that my Spanish people speak Spanish. A group of Caucasoid Spanish-speaking conquestors came over here and did what they do. They conquested. And so now why is this important? I have to speak about how they got involved in the slave trade. They seen the Arabs profiting and making so much money off of stealing from Africa and using humans as chattel. So they said, well, damn, we're going to get some of this money too. And they jumped into the slave trade. And so now, boom, after you have the Portuguese slave trade, hence Christopher Columbus, Sir Francis Drake, who was cousins with John Hardy Hawkins, who they say John Hardy Hawkins brought the first slave ship over here to America, which is called the Good Ship Jesus in 1555. I have to give you that story. And so remember, Europe was going through a time of dark ages, no natural resources. People was dying from zoonotic diseases, diseases and pathogens being, placed into the body by animals and bad hygiene. So, Europe was looking pretty crazy. And so Catholicism and the Pope was in power in Europe, and Catholicism was the primary religion. And so we know that Queen Elizabeth was rumored to have killed, Mary for the throne. And what happened was during that time, a little bit before, you have Martin Luther, who Martin Luther King Jr. is named after, who started the Protestant Reformation. And so this is where Christianity comes in. This is where the adult image of Jesus comes in, because the adult image of Jesus wasn't created until 1520. The adult image of Jesus that we see today was painted off of the second son of Pope Alexander. And so with that being said, I believe you pronunciate his name Caesar Borgia, however you pronunciate it. But with that being said, this is where the infrastructure of Christianity is created. And this is important because this leads us to the Atlantic slave trade. And so during the Protestant Reformation, basically that took off because the people of Europe felt like the Pope and the Catholic Church had too much power. And that the Pope feels that he's the vicar of Christ until Christ returns. And so the people felt like only God and Jesus should have power and dominion over the earth. And so they started protesting the Catholic Church, hence the word Protestant, a.k.a. Protestant. And so these Protestants, a.k.a. Protestants, took the Bible and did a 360. And so they created their own image of Jesus Christ, hence the adult image of Jesus Christ. And the reason I'm stressing the importance of the adult image of Jesus Christ is so you can understand the distinguishment between why Catholics worship baby Jesus and why Christians worship adult Jesus. Because before the Protestant Reformation, there was no adult Jesus. There was only the image of baby Jesus that the Catholic Church, a.k.a., the Roman Empire, took from Greek mythology. So baby Jesus is Cupid, a.k.a. Eros. Eros etymologically is rooted in the word eroticism, because a child in ancient Greece was deemed as a symbol of eroticism, because we know that the ancient Greeks practiced homosexuality in the form of the political realm. And so the Virgin Mary is actually Venus. And so when you see baby Jesus and Virgin Mary, you actually see in Eros, aka Cupid, and Venus. And so what the Martin Luther ushered in during the age of the Protestant Reformation, as well as the printing press being invented in the 1470s, a few decades before, he was able to disseminate and dispense his argument, on a mass level, because they were able to print and press paper to create books. And so as other people throughout Europe picked up this argument, it began to, pick up a wave. And so what they did was they created their own image of Jesus, and in the process of protesting the Catholic Church, you got Christianity. And so Christianity actually is rooted in the French word Christus, Christian, which goes back to the word Cretan, which means a fool or a stupid person, because this is what Catholics used to call the Christians for not, following their way religiously. And so hence the King James Bible was ushered into be created by King James via the orders of Queen Elizabeth. And so this is why Christians specifically hold so much value to that King James Bible, because that Bible was reiterated to format Christian thought patterns via the protesting of the Catholic Church. And so that Bible and Christianity was then used to engage in the slave trade that once again Europeans seen the Arabs thriving in so powerfully. And so I'm going somewhere with the point I'm making when we're talking about how black people became Muslims and the integrity of Islam. And so now we're up to date on the histories of slavery, the three major slaveries of black people. When Queen Elizabeth ushered John Hardy Hawkins and Sir Francis Drake and financially backed them into engaging into the Atlantic slave trade, they did that seeing how prosperous it was from the Arabs who were copied by the Portuguese before they were copied by the Europeans. And so, once again, we got black people over here who will denounce Jesus in the Bible due to the understanding of it being forced on our ancestors as a religious belief. But then you go and pick up Islam when Islam started it all. So Islam influenced, just like people say hip-hop, influenced so many music genres. The Arabic slave trade influenced damn near every other slave trade on black people that you've ever seen, because everybody's seeing how much the Arab was profiting off of enslaving and trading black people as chattel. And so if we gonna denounce any religion in the community, Islam has to be first, because it spawned the psychological change on the brain before any other movement. So with that being said, this is why I say it's worse to be a damn Muslim than it is to be a Christian. And so breaking down the origins of Islam, I did a lecture titled Islam and the Quran Exposed. I won't go into it too much right now. I'll do another documentary for that. But I broke down how Islam is actually a sector of Freemasonry, known as the the Noble Order of the Mystic Shrine. And so with that being said, according to this book, 33 Degrees of Deception, Islam was created, in that order specifically, was created in New York in 1872. Now, I have conflict with that because due to my personal research, I've seen Shriner Masonic architecture, in Switzerland and other places around the world that's well over 1,000 years old. So I kind of have conflict with that date. But the point I'm trying to make is it's well understood that Islam is the eastern sector of Freemasonry in regards to the attempted conquest of humanity via the New World Order. And so you have what is called a Moslem, not a Muslim, a Moslem, M-O-S-L-E-M. And if you look at the Shriner hats, which are Turkish fezzes, they have Moslem on there, they have Al-Quran on there, and other Turkish verbiage that they use to insinuate being practitioners of Islam. And so a Shriner Mason basically practices Islam. If you look at the Shriner mosque, it looks just like an Islamic mosque. And the Shriners were founded by Europeans. And so with that being said, when we talking about this aspect of Islam as well, it's important because it's not going to later on tie the Masonic background of the Nation of Islam to Freemasonry, but it's also going to break down the origins and misunderstandings of the Quran itself and the Nation of Islam, as well as their their inner workings stated and brought to the public by Malcolm X with the Ku Klux Klan. And so even when we're talking about the Quran, right? The Quran, when you spell it with a K, because you can either spell it with a K or a Q, but people don't understand the difference between making a distinguishment. When you spell Quran with the K, it's Turkish. That's the original version of spelling the Quran. When you spell it with a Q, it's English. And so you might say, well, why do you spell the Quran with a K? The Quran was actually created within Freemasonry for the Ku Klux Klan. So I have to give you a brief history. You have a 33rd degree Freemason by the name of Albert Pike, who was not only a member of the Knights of Templar, he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so he helped to revitalize and restore the Ku Klux Klan, because if you don't know, the Ku Klux Klan is a Masonic organization. You know, they run through degrees just like Freemasons, etc. And so what he did was he basically hybridized the Ku Klux Klan and bridged them into Freemasonry. And so you have what is called the Kloran, Kloran. This book was written about 1915, 1917. And what this book basically is it's a ranking file and a description book for certain Ku Klux Klan members and how they operate within, you know, the faction. And so the Kloran was spelled with the K, same way you can say, you know, blood, spell everything with a B. So they, instead of saying cuz, they say buzz. Instead of saying coolin', they say boolin'. It's just representative of the organization whenever you see that K. And so with that being said, the Quran eventually became copied by someone known as Noble Drew Ali, who was also a Freemason, who was also a charlatan, but who also subscribed to Islam. And so I did a lecture titled The Moorish Science Temple Exposed as well, where I broke down how he took a lot of his information out of the Aquarian Gospel. Hence, the Circle 7, according to the Aquarian Gospel, was symbolic to Jesus. So when you see that on the Moorish Science Temple, you know that's coming from religious rhetoric as well. But Noble Drew Ali took the Quran, which was created by the Ku Klux Klan, and he turned it into the Quran with the K, which is still Turkish. And so when you see Moors wear the fez is Turkish, okay? And so the term Moor is not ethnic. It does not denote a population of people. It's a derogatory term, okay, that's being used and was created by Germans, okay, and Slavic Europeans, aka Arabs, to negatively denote as a negative denoting term towards black people. So when you hear somebody say Moor, you might as well hear the N-word, okay? And so the word Moor means stupid, sluggish, dumb. It doesn't mean anything positive. And so for me to give you a perfect example of the way that the word is used, if you ever watched that movie called The Black Knight featuring Martin Lawrence, there's a scene where the white knight comes and he basically sexually harasses the females, and specifically the black female. And when he does, Martin stands up for her. And if you remember, the knight pulls out his sword and he puts it to Martin's face and he says, "Mind your tongue, you Moor, lest I cut it out." And so when he called Martin Lawrence a Moor, he wasn't calling him nothing royal, okay, I can tell you that. And so the movie clearly depicted the understanding and the basis of that word. And so the Moorish Science Temple was not only Freemasonic. You can see it in the Moorish Science Temple newspapers and on a little sovereignty cards. You see the Masonic handshakes. You see the third eye, all of that stuff. They co-opted the Quran from the Ku Klux Klan's Quran, as well as the crescent moon and the star. And the reason I'm bringing them up is because they allegedly practice Islam. And so when you see and you know the Ku Klux Klan's involvement with Albert Pike and becoming Freemasonic, now you can understand the Nation of Islam's involvement with the Ku Klux Klan, because Freemasons get their doctrine from Luciferianism. And so if you know anything about the Knights of Templar, you know that the Knights of Templar are important because they are the ones who allegedly created the Luciferian doctrine during the Holy Crusades. And so if you don't know what the Luciferian doctrine is, long story short, the Luciferian doctrine is basically the belief that Lucifer freed humanity from God by influencing Adam and Eve to use their free will, to which God was trying to keep them from. And so they believe, you know, this is just a quick rundown. They believe that God is really an evil deity and that Lucifer is angelic and that he's a beholder of light. This is why Lucifer always referred to or depict Satan or the devil as an angel. And so, of course, during the Holy Crusades, the Knights of the Templar couldn't just tell the Catholic Church or the church period that they believed now that God was evil. So they say that this is the origins of the formations of secret societies, hence via Freemasons. And so the Knights of Templar is one of the oldest and founding sectors of secret societies. And so that crescent moon and that star is associated with the Baphomet, okay, who was drawn by Eliphas Levi in the 1700s. And so when you see that crescent moon and that star on the Nation of Islam, and you see, you know, Baphomet doing the symbolism, and he got the crescent moon in one aspect and the star on his head, you know, we can start to tie these things together now. And so the reason that I'm making this point is because when you look at the Ku Klux Klan, they practice a Luciferianism in the sectors of Freemasonry. And the original outfit of the Ku Klux Klan was not even a white robe; it was red, black. It was a red, white, and black robe, and it had a crescent moon and a star on it. And so with that being said, when they decided that the black community was going to be infiltrated by all of these Freemasonically controlled organizations, they gave that look and that Islam rhetoric to the black community, and then they put on the white sheets, which have the Celtic cross, which is the cross where all four sides are balanced. And that Celtic cross is actually the cross of the Knights of Templar. It's not even a Christian cross. And so that being said, we want to talk about Islam, specifically the Nation of Islam's connection to Freemasonry. We have to understand, you know, how they even got their misunderstanding and who they got it from. And so long story short, Marcus Garvey, who was a pioneer in the black community at this a little before this time, was basically ushering black people to become independent, self-reliant, and go back to Africa. Once Marcus Garvey was successfully taken down by many things, whether it be, you know, HBCUs or Greek fraternities and sororities, hence W.E.B. Du Bois was quoted saying that black Greek sororities and frats was created to keep black professionals away from Marcus Garvey. Once Marcus Garvey was successfully dismantled, what they had to do was they had to purge the black community of all African-based thinking. So it was too late to try to revive Christianity on a mass scale because, you know, that had been exonerated from the consciousness of black people via Marcus Garvey. So what they did was they used organizations and people like Noble Drew Ali, Elijah Muhammad to come usher in this Asiatic black man Islamic experience. And so this is where this is coming from. So hence the KKK said, you know what, boom. And the Freemasons said, you know what, boom. We're going to take the Islam robe off. We're going to hide the fact that we're Shriners. We're going to hide the Freemason regalia. And we're going to let you take that into your communities. And then we just going to throw on the Knights of Templar regalia. So that's pretty much the template of the Nation of Islam's Freemasonic symbolism and copycatting of the Ku Klux Klan. And so one thing I want to say about a lot of these black organizations, whether it be the Hebrews, the Nation of Islam, the Moorish Science Temple, for these organizations to talk so much stuff about white people, all they have ever done was copycatted things that white people were doing first. And so Islam was not started by a black man, okay? Muhammad never existed. They don't even paint him with a face because nobody never seen his face. And so that being said, whether you want to talk about black Hebrews who are copying, you know, the white Jews. I know people like to say blacks are the original Hebrews, but no, sorry. That's all. The whole story is made up, and it was made up by white people first. Black people copied it because they didn't know their history and culture. Islam, black people copied it because they didn't know their history and culture. And so now we want to talk about the birth of the Nation of Islam, who has been here for almost 100 years and hasn't done nothing for black people, period. Okay? They were founded in 1933 by Wallace Dodd. Okay, that's what he was born. That's his name he was born under. His name was not W.D. Farad or the Prophet Allah or none of that crap. He was a charlatan, panhandling scammer named Wallace Dodd, who was a white man. And so why am I stressing the fact that he was a white man? Because the Nation of Islam teaches that white people are the devil. You cannot reform him, devil. You should not accept him, devil. Meanwhile, the Nation of Islam was founded by a white person. So they say you can sit here all day and you know, try to defend it and say he was a light-skinned black person. He was white. And so, you know, there's FBI documentation that I have that has been declassified now, where W.D. Farad is not only classified as white on his documentation, but he classified himself as white, as well as the mother of one of his children being white. And so W.D. Farad, on the birth certificate of his son, as well as these FBI documentations, as well as his multiple arrests for his criminal activity, has always been classified as white. And a previous time, I believe in 1934, where W.D. Farad was arrested, he actually admitted to using his panhandling ways and his religious ways as just trying to get as much money as possible. And so let me give you a brief history about W.D. Farad. He's from New Zealand. He was a scammer, and one of his wives also broke down how he was not that religious. You know, he never spoke about religion or anything with her. So, you know, I'm giving y'all the background of this guy to let you know how we even get into Islam from a white guy. And so what happened was W.D. Farad would go around to multiple communities, and he would use religious rhetoric to scam, you know, the locals. And so he did it. He did everything from voodoo to Christianity, etc. And so that being said, when he went to Chicago and he met with Elijah Muhammad, he flipped from Christianity to Islam because he seen it was more favorable to the community. And what he did was he flexed and finessed Elijah Muhammad into believing his rhetoric. And he flexed and finessed Elijah Muhammad so much that he convinced Elijah Muhammad that he was Allah in the flesh, etc. And so, you know, this is the alleged story of the Nation of Islam, which to me, I believe it all to be a sham and a fraud. I believe the Nation of Islam was used to infiltrate and stagnate the black community by playing upon its sensitive emotional state towards white people at that time, because there's video proof of Elijah Muhammad's son Wallace stating that his mother admitted to him that W.D. Farad never ever told Elijah Muhammad that he was Allah in the flesh, and that you know, those things were even said. So with that being said, it's a big gray area there. But assuming that the Nation of Islam is telling the truth, and that Wallace died, aka W.D. Farad, did tell Elijah Muhammad these things, W.D. Farad allegedly disappeared again in 1934 after being told by the Detroit Police Department to leave due to his charlatan ways. And so Elijah Muhammad takes on these teachings, and he builds up this alleged nation, okay, on teachings primarily based off of, you know, anti-white people rhetoric, right? And so remember, we in a different time zone now. We in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Racial tension is extremely high. Civil rights movement going on. And, you know, black people, we have a sensitive spot for, you know, racism at this time. So he's feeding off of the people's pain in order to get his own gain. And so he accompanies a member of his group by the name of Malcolm X. And so Malcolm X is probably the most essential black person to ever live in the world within the last 100 years. And the reason I say that is because Malcolm X showed a damn near extinct level of righteousness that exists in black people that we don't really see too much today. And what I mean by that is Malcolm X became a part of this organization, and in doing so, okay, Malcolm X eventually went on to discover that Elijah Muhammad impregnated multiple underage girls, you know, during his time as the leader of the Nation of Islam. So according to Malcolm X's own words, you know, Elijah Muhammad would get these young girls sent in as so-called secretaries, you know, to work in his establishment. And apparently he was having sex with these young girls. And it got so Malcolm X, you know, also stated, you know, just like everybody else, he didn't want to believe it. But it was confirmed to him not only by Elijah Muhammad's son, but by Elijah Muhammad himself.
So this story was kept among these sisters until 1962. Two of them rebelled against the person who was responsible and began to tell the story all over the city of Chicago. It caused many of the Muslims in the Chicago mosque to leave and go back out in the street. They knew it, and I knew nothing about it until 1963 when Mr. Muhammad's son, who had been in prison, came out, and he had been a minister, and he was very religious and spiritual. And when he began to hear these rumors around Chicago, he went to one of the sisters, and the sister admitted to him that the rumor was true. And it was he who first told me about it. And when he told me about it, I wrote to Mr. Muhammad and told him about it, and he admitted that he had a knowledge of it, and that he'd given me a religious explanation that would fit into prophecy and all of that. So I was quiet. And it wasn't until October of 1963 that it came up again. And when it came up again, I realized that the same person who had made these other sisters pregnant was still busy doing the same thing. He hadn't stopped. Two of the sisters had 2 children by the same man. And one of those 2 sisters was pregnant still, getting ready to have a 3rd child by the same man.
Malcolm X said he himself went to the young girl's home, synced the baby, and it was confirmed that Elijah Muhammad was the father of this underage girl's child. And Elijah Muhammad's excuse for that was biblical rhetoric to try to justify his means, saying that he was the modern David. Anybody who knows anything about Islam, you know that Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and had sex with her when she was 9. So pedophilia runs rapid, throughout these religions, in case you didn't know. Virgin Mary was 12, in case you didn't know. She was married to Joseph, he was 94. So, pedophilia is nothing new about pedophilia in religion. Hence, look at the Catholic Church. And so, going down the story chronologically, okay, in regards to Malcolm X, we're going to talk about Louis Farrakhan next and how he undermined Khalid Muhammad, even wrote a letter to the judge on Khalid Muhammad for allegedly preaching rhetoric that the Nation of Islam strongly taught. But staying on Malcolm X, right, because we want to clear up a lot of rumors, right, because I want Malcolm X's story to be told from beyond the grave. I want Malcolm X to live and channel vicariously through me right now. And so one of the biggest rumors concerning Malcolm X is that he left the Nation of Islam. That's not true. Okay, Malcolm X was kicked out of the Nation of Islam, via his own words.
But actually, despite the fact that I tried to protect the Muslim movement, if you'll notice, they used their newspaper to slander me and to label me as a hypocrite and as a rebel. And Mr. Muhammad himself said that I defected. Well, in reality, I never even left the Muslim movement. They put me out. And they put me out because of what I knew, and what I knew was told to me by Mr. Muhammad's son, Wallace Muhammad himself. They put me out, and they put him out.
And so Malcolm X says he was kicked out of the Nation of Islam for this exact reason, for finding out that Elijah Muhammad was a pedophile and got multiple teen girls pregnant. And so Malcolm X also stated that, these allegations were confirmed to him by Elijah Muhammad's son himself. And so a lot of people going to say, why Malcolm X didn't say nothing sooner? And Malcolm X said that he felt that the Nation of Islam was, positive. The movement was initially positive in regards to the reformation of the black man in America at that time. And he didn't want, for people to leave it when it's giving them, an alternative lifestyle, allegedly that was more positive, at that time.
It was known among the Chicago officials that I had a knowledge of this. They become very fearful of me. They became very antagonistic toward me, and they had to do something to diminish the authority that I had, for fear that if this became public knowledge, the followers would leave the Muslim movement and follow me. And it was at that time that they used the statement that I made against President Kennedy as a pretext to cut my authority, and some other things happened that finally produced the split, or forced the split. And when I made the split, the only reason that I didn't make this public knowledge was I knew the implications, and I felt that if the Muslims who were in the Nation of Islam knew it, that which enabled them to be so strongly religious and exercise moral discipline would be shattered, and it would cause all of them to go right back and start doing the things that they had been doing previously.
And so, Malcolm X goes on to then reconfirm how he, became aware of, this incident involving Elijah Muhammad and his pedophilic ways. And he also goes on to tell the story of the 6 girls that Elijah Muhammad, allegedly impregnated, which later on, he will go on to say was 9.
Who is the father of all of these various children whom you have enumerated?
The first one to tell me who the father was Wallace Muhammad, and he told me that the father was Elijah Muhammad himself. One of the sisters, he went to the home of one of the sisters, and when he walked in the door, she said, "I want to let you see something." And she showed him her child. She said, "Here's your brother, and your father is the father of this child." And then I questioned the sisters myself, because I was shook up. And they admitted to me that Elijah Muhammad was the father of their children. And I took it to him. And it was at that time he told me that he was Muhammad, the prophet, and that Muhammad had 9 wives. He also told me that he was David. He was the modern David, and that he was the modern Solomon, and that it was meant for him to fulfill today all of the things that they did back there.
And how many of these illegitimate children did he father with the sisters?
Well, he made 6 sisters pregnant. They all had children. 2 of those 6 had 2 children. One of those 2 is having a child right now. I am told that there is a 7th sister who is supposed to be in Mexico right now, and she's supposed to be having a child by him.
And so Malcolm X made a critical point about, Elijah Muhammad, if he tried to justify it, saying that they was his wives. But the Nation of Islam had, like their own little personal law where they was basically saying if you had sex or, children out of wedlock or, without being married to your husband, you can get, publicly reprimanded within the group and shamed and embarrassed. And so Malcolm X was basically saying, if Elijah Muhammad took these women on as his wives, or if he really honestly felt in his heart that they was his wives as he tried to use the religious rhetoric to justify his actions, then why did he allow these young girls to be publicly shamed and outcasted, and embarrassed and humiliated and drugged through the mud for being underage, having babies by the, Nation of Islam?
Justify it by saying that he's a Muslim, and that a Muslim has a right to these wives. If this were the case, these sisters should not have been humiliated. These sisters have been looked upon for the past 5 years, or 6 years, or 7 years as being guilty of having committed fornication. They have been debased. They have been degraded. I have heard him himself refer to them as having disgraced him. So if they were his wives, he should have given them a position of respect so that all of his followers would respect them and that they would have the protection of his followers today.
The Nation of Islam had plenty of propaganda, kind of like what Hitler did to the Jews. They just built it up until they influenced the country to psychologically agree with their, with their attempted, violent acts on the Jews. And so this is what the Nation of Islam did. They had newspapers in their final call of Malcolm X's head bouncing up the street. They called and referred to Malcolm X as, trying to, let's say, take over the Nation of Islam, which Malcolm X himself, already clearly stated that was something that he was never trying to do.
Well, do you feel that you then, perhaps, now should take over the leadership of the black Muslims?
No, I have no desire to take over the leadership of the black Muslims, and I have never had that desire.
Are you not, perhaps, afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
And so outside of all of the negative propaganda the Nation of Islam was putting out, Malcolm X stated that he pretty much knew he was a dead man and that there was attempts on his life due to him speaking on the Nation of Islam in regards to such a sensitive subject matter, or topic in the public eye. So you got the Nation of Islam at this time. They're supposed to be so high, mighty, and righteous, and the white man's supposed to be so weak and wicked, etc. But then you got somebody like Elijah Muhammad who has over 6 underage, girls pregnant. So that would have literally crumbled the Nation of Islam, not just internally, but externally, because criminal charges could have been brought up. And so Malcolm X stated that he knew the seriousness of what he was, bringing to the attention of the community. And on top of knowing the seriousness, he says that multiple attempts were made on his life by other members of the Nation of Islam.
Block it out of my mind.
Have you received threats on your life?
Oh, yes. I first received threats on my life in December. In December. No, not in December, in January. When it first became known that I had come back to New York and told the captain of the fruit in New York, who was my right-hand man formerly, and also the secretary of the New York Mosque and the minister in Boston. When it became known that I had told them, then an effort was made to shut me up. One brother encouraged to go out to my house and shut me up. And fortunately, it was a brother who was well capable of doing so, but it was a brother who was highly intelligent. He was academically equipped to think for himself. And what he was told to do didn't add up. And fortunately, he was the one who put out a feeler to me to find out what was wrong. And I opened his eyes. And then he opened the eyes of the same crew whose job it is to do this kind of work.
You mean he was going to kill you?
Oh, yes. One of them was, an attempt was made to get one of them to wire my car with an explosive. That one is with me right now.
One of them who is with him now, and who's been, and these attempts have not only been confirmed by himself, and so Malcolm X says that he told other members of the Nation of Islam, high-ranking members at that, and that attempts were made on his life, after he told these members. And so, according to Malcolm X, you got your low-ranking follower, crash dummy-based members who just do whatever they're told. Then the higher-ups in the hierarchy of the Nation of Islam actually knew what was going on. And after he brought this to their attention, Elijah Muhammad started to send out orders so that attempts be made on his life. So, what's even more funny to me is the Nation of Islam falsely accused Malcolm X of trying to take over the nation, which he cleared up. They falsely told the public that he left the Nation of Islam willingly, which he cleared up. But another thing that the Nation of Islam, likes to try to hide is the fact that Malcolm X, because there was a lawsuit going on back and forth between one of Malcolm X's properties via one of his homes. And so the Nation of Islam, I guess, was trying to get the property back from Malcolm X. And Malcolm X told the Nation of Islam he will willingly give them the property back. All he wants is a chance to speak in front of, the higher-ups within the Nation of Islam, basically the Nation of Islam community, and explain, and defend himself against the allegation that they was making against him. And the Nation of Islam, of course, denied that and did not allow him to speak for himself on his own behalf because they didn't want the pedophilic engagements of Elijah Muhammad to get out or get spread, within their organization.
Fortunately, while I was among the Muslims, I never lived beyond my means, and I have learned how to live within means. And I still have the clothes that that was provided for me at that time. I'm in the house that was provided for me, although we're in a court battle. They're trying to get it back. And I have made this statement to them concerning the house that they could have it. If they would take me back, that they would permit me to come before the Muslim movement, the rank and file, and explain or defend myself against all of the charges that they've made against me, they could have the house. But they are going contrary to their own laws by standing up in the mosque and indicting me, but never giving me a chance to defend myself. And they say that no one can judge me but Mr. Muhammad. In this case, Mr. Muhammad can't sit as judge because he's involved in the case.
And so what we have here is an organization that's rooted in wickedness from day one. So much to the point where they attempted to smother Malcolm X's light so that they could continue to hide in their own darkness. And, we sit here every day and we say, damn, where is the FOI, the Fruit of Islam? Where's the Nation of Islam when you need them? All of this crazy stuff going on in the black community. The Nation of Islam does not aid the black community. It only attempts to bully or coerce the black community into involving itself with that organization for that organization's own gain. And so not only am I saying that the Nation of Islam does not attack anybody else other than black people, Malcolm X said this himself.
His followers are violent against Negroes.
Against Negroes?
Yes, his followers will go out and attack another Negro, like they will attack me. or they will brutalize a fellow Muslim who breaks the law. But you don't find those same followers going out and becoming involved in the Negro struggle in any way whatsoever. Now, the violence that he accuses me of is my tendency to want to participate in the struggle of the Negro at all levels. This is what he calls violence.
And so on top of that, Malcolm X also stated that, orders are not given to the Nation of Islam for the Nation of Islam to ever defend black people against white people. Orders are only given to members to attack other black people via the convenience of Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan when the violence is in parallel with the agenda of the Nation of Islam.
Elijah Muhammad says of the Muslims, we carry no arms, and we do not seek to win victory with arms. We do nothing to others that we would not have done unto us.
The two brothers were sent after me with revolvers by Joseph, the captain of the Fruit in New York. They were armed. When a Muslim is attacked, and you'll find this to be the pattern, when the Muslims were attacked in Monroe, Louisiana, Elijah Muhammad gave no signal to anybody across the nation to come to the defense of their brothers. When our brothers were attacked in Los Angeles, again, Elijah Muhammad gave no signal to anybody to come to the defense of those brothers. Never have the Muslims anywhere in the country gotten any kind of instruction from the national office or headquarters on how to defend themselves when they are attacked by outsiders. The only times the Muslims have ever been given any instructions to commit violence is when that violence is directed against a fellow Muslim.
And so, with that being said, the history of the Nation of Islam is not only critical and detrimental to the black community, it proves useless and non-fruitful to the psychological evolutional state of not just black people, but it has a violent history with, the black community. Hence, there's rumors going around, and I'm using the word rumors very strongly here. There's rumors going around about Clarence X, or Clarence 13X, aka the founders of the Nation of Gods of Earth, who they use the 120 lessons that they got from the Nation of Islam. And so there's rumors going around about his death because he was remastering the lessons. And so with that being said, the Nation of Islam is not only it's not only been directly involved with the dissension of the black community, their name has come up in multiple homicides on a high scale, via rumor. Biggie Smalls' bodyguard alleged that somebody from the Nation of Islam killed Biggie Smalls.
A guy in the Nation of Islam shot Big. And I said, yo, dog, he had the blue suit, blue bow tie, white shirt, peanut head, receding hairline, brown skin. He was like, yeah, dog, how you know? I said, the nigga came up to me first. I said, he came to us first. He walked up the Puff van. And I got him off. And he was like, get the fuck out of here. I was like, yeah, straight up for real. He came up there first. Huh?
I asked Gene why Biggie's friends hadn't been more cooperative with the police.
I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for Miss Wallace. You know what I'm saying? If she wasn't pouring her heart crying, I wouldn't be saying jack shit to you. You understand? I think, yeah, some of the other people in the whole crew should have came forward. Yeah, I believe that. You understand? Because I believe Big is turning over in his grave because people ain't coming to the forefront for his love.
And so in another clip, Malcolm X clearly states that he didn't leave the Nation of Islam. He was put out because of what he knew. And he also states that Elijah Muhammad's son also was put out for having the same knowledge in regards to Elijah Muhammad's dealing with underage girls.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretary. The one who first made me aware of this was Wallace Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad's son. And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort
to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, that's moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
What steps will you take to protect yourself from this threat?
I take no steps. I have a rifle. If anybody comes to my house without a good reason, I intend to try and use it, and that's all.
And so, you know, the level of confrontation got so high that it got to the point where multiple attempts were made on Malcolm X's life, all because Elijah Muhammad was afraid and Farrakhan was afraid that the world would know that Elijah Muhammad was a pedophile. So these are the lengths and extents that the Nation of Islam went to try to shut up Malcolm X. Burning down his home while his children was in it, etc. Multiple attempts on his life. Malcolm X said that, you know, the Nation of Islam made multiple attempts on his life. One thing I can respect about Malcolm X is he stood in his truth so strongly. You know, he wasn't worried about, you know, the attempts that was being made on his life. You know, that he consciously, you know, acknowledged to the public.
Are you not perhaps afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
But one thing I will say that I feel for about Malcolm X is that's a different kind of internal pain. You know, when you just imagine being psychologically raised to believe that white people have done so much wickedness, which they actually have, but in the same truth, you know, the black person that's telling you this, they got an even darker truth for you, and that truth is that they doing the same thing, if not worse, than what the alleged devil is doing, you know? So you got a guy sitting here accusing white people of slavery and pedophilia and all kind of stuff, and then the same guy that's telling you that, you find out he's a pedophile. And then not only do you find out he's a pedophile, now he basically gives the green light on your assassination and is putting your wife and your children literally in harm's way. And so I can only imagine the pain and the level of betrayal and the level of letdown that Malcolm X felt by the Nation of Islam. And the Nation of Islam is so barbaric and savage, you know, in their pursuit to cover up and defend a pedophile, that they was willing to burn Malcolm X's house down with his women and his children inside in order to defend someone who chose to have sex with and impregnate underage girls. So this shows you the level of devilishment that Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam is willing to carry out in order to uphold evil. And there's no other way around that. But given all of the evidence that we have so far and the agenda and the motive, right? I have no doubt in my mind that the Nation of Islam, if not killed Malcolm X, was involved in the murder of Malcolm X. Here's a 1972 audio clip of Louis Farrakhan boasting about the death of Malcolm X.
You don't jump up against a divine messenger of God like he did. He asked to die. And God obliged you. No, you don't understand. Like someone said, did you Muslims kill Malcolm? So the messenger said, and what if we did? He said, what if we did? Have you ever seen him as your leader, not knowing nothing about him while he was alive and know less about him now that he's dead. Malcolm's momentum carried him to his death.
And now here's a clip of Louis Farrakhan. I believe this clip is from 1993, trying to justify the death of Malcolm X, calling him a traitor.
Yeah, I love Elijah Muhammad enough that if you attack him, I would kill you. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I'm not a killer, but neither are you. But if somebody attack what you love, each one of you in here would become a killer instantaneously. Am I lying? Mother, let somebody look like they're attacking your child. Here's a woman who fought a bear because the bear snatched her baby. And she ran the bear down, screaming until the bear dropped her baby. Love casts out fear. We don't give a damn about no white man law when you attack what we love. And frankly, it ain't none of your business. What have you got to say about it? Did you teach Malcolm? Did you make Malcolm? Did you clean up Malcolm? Did you put Malcolm out before the world? Was Malcolm your traitor or was he ours? And if we dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours? You just shut your mouth and stay out of it. Because in the future, we're going to become a nation. And the nation got to be able to deal with traitors and cutthroats and turncoats. The white man deals with his. The Jews deal with theirs. Salman Rushdie wrote a nasty thing about the prophet, and Imam Khomeini put out a death thing on him, and it stands today.
And last but not least, here's a clip of Elijah Muhammad, nonchalantly saying that he doesn't expect any repercussions due to the death of Malcolm X, and that Malcolm X got what he deserved and what he asked for.
You have been discussed quite a bit in the news lately, ever since your organization's convention in Chicago several weeks ago. Since the death of Malcolm X, have you encountered any serious trouble, or do you expect any serious trouble?
I have not encountered any serious trouble, and I don't expect to encounter with any serious trouble from Malcolm's death. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself.
Do you feel possibly something that Malcolm brought on himself then?
Well, he did bring all of it on himself. If he had stayed with us, following me, he would not have been dead today. He would have been a living man today. I believe Malcolm knew these things. But in fact about it, he been all fired for self. And as all jealous leaders meet with some such kind of fate one day or another. And so he was all fired for going for himself, as he said. And going contrary to the truth by telling other than the truth, it don't bring a person to no good end. So Malcolm met with just what he preached.
You feel then possibly he was more interested in serving his own interests than a cause?
Well, I believe that he really wanted to be that which God had not made him. Peace.
And so now, you know, we could conclude that these demons, these black devils, as I like to call it, you know, it is in my deepest beliefs of beliefs that they conspired to kill Malcolm X because he was afraid, Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan was afraid that the world would know that the Nation of Islam was involved in sex with underage girls. And so, you know, this is critical because a lot of people say, well, if the Nation of Islam killed Malcolm X, why they never went to jail for it? Good question. You tell me. Because people get charged with conspiracy all the time. And so we have a motive, okay? If I was a district attorney prosecuting this case and somebody said, well, I think the Nation of Islam was involved in the assassination of Malcolm X, I would say, okay, well, you need a motive to commit murder. Here's the motive right here. Covering up the fact that Elijah Muhammad was a pedophile, okay? That's the goddamn motive. And so Malcolm X said that publicly. So the only inclination I can get out of why the Nation of Islam was not prosecuted in the death of Malcolm X is because if they didn't do it themselves, they were allegedly working hand in hand with the government. So Malcolm X's daughter, you know, was actually arrested for being on her way to seek revenge against Louis Farrakhan because she believed also that Louis Farrakhan was responsible for the death of her father. But there's been other intellects out here, such as Dick Gregory, who has made statements, you know, such as the CIA drilling holes in the walls of the venue 2 weeks before Malcolm rented it out, and that the Nation of Islam ran up on the stage and they had blanks, and Malcolm was actually shot by sniper rifles, according to the autopsy, according to Dick Gregory. So this is why I say if the Nation of Islam wasn't directly involved, then they were cooperating with the death of Malcolm X. And this is why, with so much overwhelming and propelling evidence, there is still, you know, not a conspiracy charge, you know, against the Nation of Islam. And so, on top of the Masonic ties, on top of all of the pictures of Elijah Muhammad inside of Masonic poses, and on top of all of the pictures of Louis Farrakhan making Masonic gestures, you know, there's it's just a big gray area with the Nation of Islam that should not be with any organization that claims to be for the community that is for, but yet is only taken from. And so there was an interview that Malcolm X did where Malcolm X stated that the Nation of Islam made a deal with the KKK basically to deceive the black community. So Malcolm X stated that the Ku Klux Klan and Elijah Muhammad made a deal where, or were attempting to make a deal. He says he doesn't know the extent of them negotiations and if they were successful because he wasn't there, but he does state that the Ku Klux Klan were no longer harming black Muslims in the South. So apparently the deal went somewhere, you know, I believe it's safe to assume. But he stated that the Ku Klux Klan would allow the Nation of Islam to basically occupy a certain amount of space and make it look like that they successfully resegregated from black people. For what in return exactly the KKK wanted, I don't know the full extent. But Malcolm X made those allegations in an interview, you know, before his untimely pass.
You mentioned conspiracy between the black Muslims and the white wing in this country. Could you elaborate on that?
I mentioned the conspiracy between the Muslims and the right wing in this country. I know for a fact that there is a conspiracy between the Muslims and the Lincoln Rockwell Nazi and also the Ku Klux Klan. There is a conspiracy.
Describe this conspiracy.
Well, the Ku Klux Klan made a deal, or were trying to make a deal with Elijah Muhammad in 1960 in the home of Jeremiah X, the minister in Atlanta at that time, who was president of the minister in Philadelphia. They were trying to make a deal with him to make available to Elijah Muhammad a county, a size tract of land in Georgia or South Carolina, where Elijah Muhammad could then induce Negroes to migrate and make it appear that his program of a segregated state or separated state was feasible. And to what extent these negotiations finally developed, I do not know, because I was not involved in them beyond the period of December 1960. But I do know that after that, Jeremiah,
who was the minister throughout the South, could roam the entire South and the Klan not bother him in any way, shape, or form, nor would they bother any of the black Muslims from then on, nor would the black Muslims bother the Klan.
Are you inferring then that because of this conspiracy, the attempt was made upon your life?
The attempt could have been made upon my life. Ask that again.
Are you inferring that because of this conspiracy, the attempt was made on your life?
Not necessarily that conspiracy. The attempt was made upon my life because I speak my mind and I know too much, and they know that I will speak it whether they like it or not.
And so Malcolm X stated that, you know, he knew too much, and on top of him knowing too much, this was a huge reason, you know, for why Elijah Muhammad wanted him killed, and that Elijah Muhammad did order the hits to be carried out on his life that were attempted.
Yes, now, Elijah Muhammad called all of his officials, national officials, to Chicago in October and ordered them to kill or maim any of his followers who leave him to follow me. Well, when you say, how do I know? Many of the brothers who were in at that time are out now. And if this ever come into the court, there are plenty of witnesses who can stand up and testify to it.
One of the biggest misconceptions I have about Malcolm X, or the people have about Malcolm X, I think, which is purposely put out there, is that he was like crazy racist to the point where he was ignorant in regards to the development of black people. And so here's why it's so critical that we realize that, you know, the loss of Malcolm X, you know, is so important. Malcolm X explained that not only was he not racist, he was willing to work with any and all leaders or organizations that was actually fruitful and beneficial to the development and evolution of black people. Malcolm X's only argument was that the community should be the head and dictator of its own population, period.
But the Organization of Afro-American Unity intends to get involved in every kind of action that's going on in New York City. We don't intend to let anybody downtown influence us in any way, shape, or form. We want the influence to come from Harlem and from other Harlems around the country. Now, this doesn't mean we're anti-outside of Harlem. This doesn't mean we're anti-Bronx or anti-White Plains or anti-white or anti-German or anything like that, but it means we're pro-Harlem. We're pro-ourselves. We want to start doing something for ourselves. That's all it means. It means that we want to stop begging you for your school. We want you to get out of the way and let us straighten out the schools in Harlem.
Do you intend to take any part in the political campaign this fall?
We intend to take part in everything that will get results at eliminating the injustices that our people are confronted with in this country. Politically, economically, anything.
Will you support candidates of either of the two parties?
We'd rather not say at this time.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly, certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
And so with that being said, it's important that we realize what we lost with Malcolm X, because Malcolm X was not only trying to actually do for black people, he wasn't against help from any people, including white people. So like when you see the little clip in the Malcolm X movie where the white lady say, "What can I do to help?" And you know Malcolm X in the movie says nothing. You know, that's not really how Malcolm X was moving. Malcolm X just felt that black people should be in control of black people, and if there's anybody trying to aid in the upliftment of black people, then they should. Malcolm X was trying to take, you know, our plights to the United Nations and things like that. And the point I'm trying to make is Malcolm X also spoke on Louis Farrakhan, you know, not trying to take the plights of black people to the United Nations.
When the government of South Africa began to trample upon the human rights of the people of South Africa, they were taken to the UN. When the government of Portugal began to trample upon the rights of our brothers and sisters in Angola, it was taken before the UN. Why, even the white man took the Hungarian question to the UN, and just this week, Chief Justice Goldberg was crying over 3 million Jews in Russia about their human rights.
charging Russia with violating the UN Charter because of its mistreatment of the human rights of Jews in Russia. Now you tell me, how can the plight of everybody on this earth reach the halls of the United Nations, and you have 22 million Afro-Americans whose churches are being bombed, whose little girls are being murdered, whose leaders are being shot down in broad daylight? Now you tell me why the leaders of this struggle have never taken it before the United Nations. So our next move is to take the entire civil rights struggle problem into the United Nations. And let the world see that Uncle Sam is guilty of violating the human rights of 22 million Afro-Americans, and still has the audacity or the nerve to stand up and represent himself as the leader of the free world. Not only is he a crook, he's a hypocrite. Here he is standing up in front of other people, Uncle Sam, with the blood of your and my mothers and fathers on his hands, with the blood zipping down his jaws like a bloody-jawed wolf, and still got the nerve to point his finger at other countries. You can't even get civil rights legislation. And this man has got the nerve to stand up and talk about South Africa, or talk about Nazi Germany, or talk about Portugal. No more days like those.
And so with that being said, you know, we've seen Louis Farrakhan out here how many years, the Nation of Islam out here how many years. Not only have they still to this day failed to take our human rights violations in front of the United Nations, Louis Farrakhan has failed to actually try to fill the footsteps of Malcolm X, meanwhile belittling him and just straight disrespecting this man's legacy after they know that they unjustly and unrighteously, you know, assassinated this man in order to hide their little dark secrets. And so with that being said, what people need to understand about Malcolm X is Malcolm X was actually an influence, okay? Because it's our responsibility to change ourselves as people on this planet. But Malcolm X was actually a great influence to that change. Louis Farrakhan, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, the rest of these so-called black leaders, they're just imposters to the work that Malcolm X actually was trying to accomplish and do. And so understanding the essence of who Malcolm X is, you know, and I say is because his spirit is still here among us, you know, that's what influenced me to be pro-righteous, you know, and say, you know, not even be pro-black. And when I say that, I mean this in the least cooning way possible, you know, because I have a duty as a black person to, you know, stay in allegiance and alignment with my ancestors. But, you know, I realized the level of infiltration within the black community. I realized the level of wickedness. I realized the level of misuse of black culture to, you know, utilize people's excuses for wickedness. So, you know, I started, I'm not going to say a movement, but my own pocket of energy to live in, and I just call it pro-righteousness. You know, I'm pro-righteous. You know, if you for the betterment and evolution of this planet Earth, you know I can rock with you. And that's the same philosophy that Malcolm X carried. And so the reason that this is important is because, as I stated before, Malcolm X, his awareness began to expand. We know he was taking trips to Africa, etc. And Malcolm X also spoke on, you know, why Elijah Muhammad couldn't go to the Middle East.
He knows that if he had wanted to, he could have united our people with the Muslim world just by teaching the right religion of Islam. He could have done so. The entire Muslim world would have accepted him. As it is now, the Muslim world has rejected him. He can never go into them. He was also in a position to unite us with Africa. But you cannot read anything that Elijah Muhammad has ever written that's pro-African. I defy you to find one word in his direct writing that's pro-African. You can't find it.
And so the fact that Elijah Muhammad doesn't speak on being African, how can you be pro-black? How can you be, you know, for the black community and you speak negatively against Africans? As a matter of fact, you know, there was a lecture Louis Farrakhan gave, where he was actually teaching the curse of Ham, which comes out of the Babylonian Talmud. And the curse of Ham basically teaches you that black people had straight hair and pointy noses in the beginning of time. And they did something to where God disfavored them, and so God cursed them. And he turned their straight hair kinky, and he turned their noses and their lips black. He turned their noses and their lips big, and then he turned their skin black and being burnt. And so this is an actual curse called the curse of Ham, Genesis chapter 9, verses 25 through 27, Babylonian Talmud. Go look it up. And so Louis Farrakhan actually was teaching this to black people.
I mean, you know, with I'm black and I'm proud, we got to learn to be proud of kinks. Because most of your family of other black people on the earth, jet black. They didn't have no broad nose and thick lips and kinky hair. They were dark-skinned people, jet black. But they had straight hair, a thinner lip, a thinner nose. But we are marked as a different kind of black person. And we were rejected and despised, not only from the circle of the gods, but we were despised and rejected by all the other dark people of the earth. This is why today black people with kinky hair and broad nose and thick lips are rejected in every society. I want you to hear me well tonight. Yes, sir. Why are we rejected? Because the essence of beauty is in obedience and submission to God. And the essence of ugliness is when you rebel against God. And when you rebel against God, in your rebellion, you are marked with a certain mark of your rebellion, which is the disfigurement of your internal self, which manifests in the disfigurement of your external self.
And so the reason I say that is because, first of all, if you a Muslim, what are you doing even reading the damn Babylonian Talmud? Second of all, what are you doing teaching Jewish teachings to an alleged Islamic crowd or a black crowd? Third of all, what are you doing teaching self-hating rhetoric to black people? That's like me telling a fish, oh, you only got gills because your ancestors disrespected Poseidon, so Poseidon cursed you to have gills and fins. Now, we just spiritually giving self-hate a reason to thrive. So it's kind of like when black people say, well, Spanish happened because we did something to God and made God mad. It was supposed to happen. Now what you're saying is that I'm black and I'm ugly and my hair is kinky and my nose is big because God cursed me. So Louis Farrakhan sat in front of a crowd of people and said this. He also told, black women that their hair was a dust catcher.
You won't never see the followers of Honorable Elijah Muhammad growing our hair all up off our head like a mop or a bird nest to prove to whitey man that we are proud of our kinky hair or what you call wearing a natural. What else is it? It's natural, isn't it? Well, man, you don't have to let it grow wild. Cut that damn thing, man, and look like you intelligent. Wait a minute. Don't get hot with me, brother. I love you. But look, man, you get yourself laughed at. We're not going to laugh at you because we're flesh and blood. But you see, here's a man, got his hair all up. And I'm not making mockery because, brother, if we weren't under the teaching of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we probably wouldn't have no hair. We'd be out there doing something worse. But it's a dust catcher and a disease catcher. You're not doing yourself any good. Well, you say we're braiding it now. My God, I'm telling you. Brother, you just going from the sublime to the ridiculous. I don't know what was sublime, but all of it looked ridiculous.
And so, on top of telling black women that their hair was a disease and a dust catcher, Louis Farrakhan also stated that you are not to follow, you know, the styles of Africa.
You are not to follow the styles of Africa. Allah didn't raise you up today to copy the style of Africa.
And so the reason I say that is because Malcolm X, like I said, it wasn't internet back then. You know, you had to actually read a book. So his level of intellect in a detailed manner was limited, but his awareness was it was unlimited. It was unparalleled. So, you know, Malcolm X not only stated that Elijah Muhammad never spoke positively about Africans or African features, but here you got Louis Farrakhan directly speaking negatively about being African and the origins of African features, even calling, you know, our hair a disease and a dust catcher. And so, you know, how can this organization be pro-black when not only has brought so much destruction to the black community psychologically and physically, it doesn't even intellectually approve of what makes you black as a black person, period. And so when Malcolm X, you know, stated that the Nation of Islam was a criminal organization, you know, beyond a reasonable doubt, sitting here right now in front of you, family, I don't find that hard to believe.
There's no organization in this country that could do more for the struggling black man than the black Muslim movement if it wanted to. But it has gotten into the possession of a man who's become senile in his old age and perhaps doesn't realize it. And then he has surrounded himself by his children who are now in power and want nothing but luxury and security and comfort, and will do anything to safeguard their own interests. I feel responsible for having played a major role in developing a criminal organization.
And on top of the Nation of Islam, you know, never defending black people and only attacking black people like Malcolm X stated and like we've seen, you know, contrary to that, there's plenty images which make me suspect the Nation of Islam's alleged loyalty and agenda to the black community. You got images of them defending known cult members like Jim Jones. If you don't know who Jim Jones is, you know that saying, don't drink the Kool-Aid, that's where that comes from. Jim Jones, you know, poisoned all of them black people and babies, you know, in his cult and killed them, you know, by the thousands. And there's pictures of the American neo-Nazi party accompanied by George Rockwell, front row of Nation of Islam at a Nation of Islam summit. And so, you know, their loyalty and their true agenda is very questionable. Not even now, but, you know, even then, period. As I stated before, Malcolm X stated that Elijah Muhammad was a pedophile. And in another interview he did, he went from saying that it was 6 alleged girls to saying that it was 9.
Yes, he's immoral. You can't take 9 teenage women and seduce them and give them babies and not tell me and then tell me you're moral. You could do it if you admitted you did it and admitted that the babies were yours. I'd shake your hand and call you a man. A good one, too. But anytime you seduce teenage girls and make them be charged with adultery, make them hide your crime, why, you're not even a man, much less a divine man. So, and this is what he did. He took at least 9 that we know about. And I'm not speculating because he told this to me himself. Yes, that's why he wanted me dead, because he knew that as soon as I woke up, I'd tell him.
But we had a law which was that whenever any Muslim became involved in any kind of sexual relationship with someone to whom they weren't married, that person would be brought before the Muslim community, humiliated, and then isolated from 1 to 5 years. This was our law. Well, in 1954, a teenage sister left Detroit and became one of Mr. Muhammad's personal secretaries. And there in the Chicago office, she became pregnant after being there for a year. And she was brought before the Muslim community and humiliated and isolated. And a year later, another secretary, this time one from Lansing, Michigan, came to Chicago. She also became pregnant. She was brought before the community and humiliated and isolated. And because the other person was never brought forth during this court session, it was concluded by all of Mr. Muhammad's followers that it was a non-Muslim who was the other party. Well, we grew so rapidly until that in 1957 or 58, the secretarial staff was expanded to, I think, 8 teenage sisters. In 1959, 6 of them disappeared. 2 of them reappeared in Philadelphia about 2 or 3 months later, and they were all right. The other 4 reappeared in 1960. All 4 of them had babies. All 4 of them had become involved with someone and become pregnant and had these children. So it was, from what I now know, when the 4 of them got back to Chicago and began to compare notes, they found that the same man had told all of them the same story and had made all of them pregnant, that the same man was the father of all 4 of their children and had also been the father of the children brought forth by the 2 secretaries who preceded them.
And so on top of that, you know, the very foundations of the Nation of Islam, as I stated earlier, is very shaky. You know, according to Elijah Muhammad's son, his father lied about what he was told by Wallace Dodd, a.k.a. W.D. PHARAOH, a.k.a. W.D. Muhammad.
Was the incarnation of he was God on earth. You know.
I differed with my father.
Yes.
And I didn't want to differ with him.
Yes.
In fact, I never differed with him directly. I was told, he was told that someone heard me saying something different.
Mm-hmm.
So he called me to question me about it. And I told him that I could more readily believe that he was God than I could believe that his teacher was God, because his teacher was a white man, and he said white people were devils. And also I told him that I understand something from your teacher that makes me believe that he said those things, but he also left enough evidence of his real intent, and that was to bring us to the correct idea of God in Islam. For example, my mother, when I was leaving the home one day, after my father had insisted that I accept God the way he presented God, or I was going to be cut off from all communication. He told me he knew it would hurt me to know that I wouldn't be able to see my mother. He said, you won't be able to talk to your mother, I'll see her. So I didn't change. And as I was leaving, my mother was hurt, and it hurt me to see her hurting like that. She said she walked me to the door, which she didn't do. That was normal for her. When my father excused you. And she stood on the porch at the door, and she said, Wallace, why don't you go back there and accept? Just say you believe. I said, Mama, tell me what Mr. PHARAOH told you all. I said, did he tell you he was God? And she looked like her face went blank and looked like she didn't know what to say. And a few seconds she said, no, he did not. Said, in fact, he told us to not even call him prophet. Said that was too big a title for him. Then I said to my mother, how can you ask your son now to accept a man as God who told you prophet was too big a title for him?
And so on top of Malcolm X having such a huge level of distrust with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, other leaders such as, you know, Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Sabi also, you know, had their opinions on the fraudulent behavior, you know, and the fraudulent status of Louis Farrakhan.
And suppose one of our leaders, I'm going to pick out a famous one so it'll make you angry, but at least make you think. Suppose a faker like Louis Farrakhan would say, I will not ride in a limousine until my people make a limousine. All right. He could revolutionize and create a black auto industry. All right. But what is he doing? All right. Begging at the feet of Arab slave traders for a handout.
I was concerned with the black leadership of America, not medical science. When I had cured these people of sickle cell and lupus and herpes and blindness, I was happy. I said, now I could go to all the leaders. I could go to Minister Farrakhan. I could go to Jesse Jackson. I could go to Al Sharpton. I could go to Oprah Winfrey. But what I found out, I was mistaken. I was wrong. They are not interested in the healing of any black people.
That's an explosive claim.
That is not an explosive statement. That is a reality. There isn't a black leader in America that is interested in the health of the black race.
Do you say that because they refuse to interact with you?
They are not in the position to respond. If they were, my first case of AIDS was cured in 1984. Yeah. And since then, we've been curing people of lupus and herpes and cancer and blindness. Not one black leader ever said, well, let us help the brother.
And so after the agenda to get rid of Malcolm X was successful, Louis Farrakhan then begins to, at this point, what you would call sell out, and deviate from his message. But he tries to do it in a tone to where he seems like he's becoming more moral. And the reason I got to tread lightly here is because, you know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, psychological evolution and ascension, but that's not the case with a snake such as Louis Farrakhan. So he begins to deviate from his message and throw other members such as Khalid Muhammad under the bus. So, for example, we know that the Nation of Islam teaches that the white man is the devil. You start to see Louis Farrakhan make statements such as not only can white people join the Nation of Islam now, to which Elijah Muhammad, his founder, once said that they couldn't, but that he's found something different and evolved beyond the teachings of Elijah Muhammad.
Dreamed of the day that children will be recognized by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Do you see a day when whites will be allowed to join the black Muslims?
Yes. Yes. There, you know, I must say this. Some of my own brothers may be shocked at this, but you asked me a question, and I have to answer you truthfully. If you look at the message of Jesus, it started first very narrowly among the lost sheep. And Jesus was told, go ye not in the way of the Samaritans or in the way of the Gentiles, but to the lost sheep. And then at a certain point he said, go ye into all the world, to every nation, kindred, and tongue. If you will look at the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it first was directed to black people because we were in the worst condition. But not only are we lost, the whole human family is lost, and therefore the message has to evolve, and we have to evolve. And I'll close that point by saying, in Christ, there is no Greek, no Jew, no bond, no free, no male, no female. This means that we all are going to have to grow out of rabid nationalism, sexism, racism, materialism in order to claim Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior.
And so the reason that I'm stressing that is because, you know, this is going to lead to Louis Farrakhan and Ron L. Hubbard, you know, in a second, and him actually defending Ron L. Hubbard and saying he thanks God for Ron L. Hubbard and things like that. But we want to talk about Khalid Muhammad. Khalid Muhammad was basically in his prime within the Nation of Islam, a little bit after Malcolm. And Khalid Muhammad, as you can see, was initiated and took his oath into the NOI, you know, by means of Louis Farrakhan personally.
Will you pledge as a son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to lift up his name among the people of America and the people of the earth? Yes, sir, I do. Since that name Muhammad means one worthy of praise, will you pledge that you will not make a mockery of this name
that every act that you do, every deed that you do, every word that you speak, every thought that you think should be in harmony with your name and the name of our Lord, our Father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that those thoughts, those acts, those deeds will be deeds worthy of praise.
Yes, sir, I pledge to do that to the best of my ability, and I pray that Allah will continue to strengthen me to live up even more.
And do you, my brother, pledge that when you do these works that are worthy of praise, that you will not take the praise yourself, but will give the praise to whom it rightly belongs, Almighty God, Allah, and His servant, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who has inspired us to do all that we are doing?
Yes, sir, I do.
And will you uphold this charge till Almighty God, Allah, takes your life from this planet?
Yes, sir, I will.
And from this day forward, this great brother in Islam will be known as Brother Abdul Khalid Muhammad, and his wife will no longer wear the name Paula. She's his mate, so she's Khalida Muhammad.
And so with that being said, what happened was Khalid Muhammad gave a speech at a university, and according to Caucasians, I guess this speech was considered hate speech. It was anti-Semitic, etc. And Louis Farrakhan, you know, according to this Washington Post article, Louis Farrakhan not only denounced Khalid Muhammad, but he wrote a letter to the judge stating that Khalid Muhammad would no longer be able to practice his ministry. And so here's where I have a problem with that. The Nation of Islam teaches that the white man is the devil, okay? This is what they taught. Louis Farrakhan basically, you know, in my assumption, gets an order from whatever higher power or, you know, high-ranking Freemasonic member that he answers to get rid of Khalid Muhammad, okay? And so what happens is Khalid Muhammad catches some cases, and Louis Farrakhan writes the white judge, okay? This same judge that Louis Farrakhan talking about is the devil. He writes the judge against Khalid Muhammad, saying that Khalid Muhammad will no longer be able to practice his ministries within the Nation of Islam, for basically saying that the white man is the devil. Yet everything coming out of Khalid Muhammad's mouth, Louis Farrakhan taught. And so Louis Farrakhan then went on to publicly denounce Khalid Muhammad, saying that he doesn't agree with his rhetoric.
Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam claim they are moving toward moderation and increased tolerance. You decide. Minister Farrakhan spoke in Washington this afternoon.
Recent events surrounding the remarks by one of my ministers is causing intense concern among many people. Brother Khalid Abdul Muhammad spoke at Keene College at the invitation of the students. The students chose his subject for him. During the speech, Brother Khalid made remarks that were not consistent with the proper representation of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his teachings and guidance, myself, and the Nation of Islam. I found the speech, after listening to it in context, vile in manner, repugnant, malicious, mean-spirited, and spoken in mockery of individuals and people, which is against the spirit of Islam. While I stand by the truths that he spoke, I must condemn in the strongest terms the manner in which those truths were represented. I therefore have dismissed Brother Khalid from his post as minister, representative, and national assistant until he demonstrates that he is willing to conform to the manner of representing Allah, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his truth, his guidance, aim, and his purpose for us in America in a manner that would be pleasing to Allah, his messenger, myself, and the nation. I have an internal and secret document put out by the Civil Rights Division of the Anti-Defamation League this January. This document reveals their strategy for dealing with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. The ADL raises the question, does Farrakhan's acceptance by the mainstream black community represent a newfound tolerance for anti-Semitism, which the ADL must fight with every weapon at our disposal? What do these weapons include? One of the weapons identified by the ADL and mentioned in their document is their exploitation of, quote, some of the nation's top black political and civil rights leaders who have long been envious of Farrakhan's ability to reach large, enthusiastic audiences.
Meanwhile, he denounced Khalid Muhammad for that rhetoric, but just recently went on to go on a rant saying that the Jews was his enemy.
Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off of that satanic Jew. Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
And so here's my thing. How you gonna denounce Khalid Muhammad and then do the same thing later? Okay, how you gonna say that, we talking about, you know, hypocrisy here. How is the white man the devil and this, that, and the third, but his son is married to a white woman? And so his mother, his daughter-in-law, okay, and he's the father-in-law to Caucasians. So he sat here for all of these years, built up a platform based off playing on black people's emotional soft spot for high racial tensions at the time, and then did a complete 360 on black people. So he helped in the aid and participation of the elimination of Malcolm X for trying to help cover up pedophilia. He got rid of Khalid Muhammad for he got rid of Khalid Muhammad in order to aid the feelings of the white community at the time and whoever he answered to. And he sat here and, you know, did all of this sacrilegious speaking about uplifting black people and this, that, and the third. And his son is married to a white woman. So, you know, we want to talk about, you know, just contradictory here, just off the chain. And so, you know, not only is this ridiculous, you know, Farrakhan, his level of savagery when it comes to being low down is so high that he avoided Khalid Muhammad. You know, according to Khalid Muhammad, he couldn't get in contact with him for 5 years. Farrakhan used to pick up the phone, say he was going to meet with him, never met with him. And so, you know, Khalid Muhammad, you know, via his words, was betrayed by Louis Farrakhan.
No, brother, I didn't like what my father did to my little brother, turning Malik Shabazz like that in front of everyone. I was the first to call the million. We all love you for that. And if you heard the tape, saw Brother Clemson Brown's video or any of the others, or if you were there, you know we gave props to Minister Farrakhan from the beginning to the end. And if you visited our website on the World Wide Web, we invited him. I didn't expect him to come. And I'm nobody's puppy dog. I'm not going to tuck my tail and go sniffing behind. Nobody. Louis Farrakhan didn't teach me that way. Much of what I am by the power of God and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and what they put in him, he put it in me. And that's the way I'm going to be from here on out. I'm not changing. I got one letter from Minister Farrakhan in 5 years. One letter in 5 years, though I had written him. I called him repeatedly. You've heard me talk about it, right at the UAM forum. For years, he set up meetings and postponed the meetings. When I was in the hospital, shot down like a dog, he never visited me. Never sent me a letter. Never sent me a postcard. Not a penny, not a nickel, not a dime the whole damn time. I know what happened between Malcolm and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how Malcolm's letters were being intercepted, how his calls were being intercepted. So I know when to reach my father, so I would call him early in the morning when I knew he would answer the phone. And I would sometimes speak directly to him. And he would be just as nice and promise that we would meet, and there were no meetings. I stopped doing that, and I said everywhere he was going to speak, I would go and sit on the front row or the second row to say, here I am. Will you see me? Can we talk? Can we work this out? I want to come back. Remember how dedicated I've been. Remember how committed I've been, how devoted I've been. Remember, I was with you when your son was not with you. I was with you when your daughters were not with you. I was with you when none of the Nation of Islam was with you. Remember me. I'm the one who used to pack 2 pistols to make sure that nobody would do anything to you. I'm the one who would stand next to you with a gun and a Bible. I'm the one who was willing to take a bullet for you if an enemy stood up to shoot you down. I would sit on the front row, the second row, begging almost, pleading. What in the hell do I look like 5 years later, calling a man saying we're having the Million Youth March? Will you come and help us, please, sir? Hell no. We still invited him because it was the right thing to do. But we don't have to consult you. We consult God and God alone, God damn it.
And so, you know, this leads us to modern day Louis Farrakhan. I guess Khalid Muhammad was too turned up to be his successor. So many years later, he's trying to establish another fraud by the name of Rizza Islam as his successor, who I recently had to do an exposed video on him as well. Background story. You know, Louis Farrakhan gets introduced to Scientology allegedly via the parent guardians of Rizza Islam in 1993, who were highly involved with the Church of Scientology. And so, long story short, let me give you a quick background. The Rizza Islam actually has an open case, you know, to this day. His most current court date is this upcoming May 2019 in Los Angeles, because his parents, as well as him, were charged with many things, one of those things being medical fraud, and what they were doing in Los Angeles out of a front for the Church of Scientology, which was backed by the Church of Scientology, underneath the title of the World Literacy Crusade. They were taking high schoolers and high school football athletes and students, and they were allegedly putting them through Scientology drills and tests, but they were acting like they were performing alcohol and drug rehabilitation on teenagers who were not even alcohol or drug abusers. So, you know, they was collecting money, you know, for performance services that were actually not taking place. And they were recently charged and arrested, you know, for these occurrences in 2015. And they, according to law enforcement, this had been going on since 2004. And so he actually still has a pending case for this now. And so once again, when Malcolm X says that the Nation of Islam is a criminal organization, that's not hard to believe. And so why is this important? Scientology, right? is based in satanic teachings. Louis Farrakhan said he respected Ron L. Hubbard. He also said he thanks God for Ron L. Hubbard.
The characteristics of the white man is evil. He was made like that through nature, now we say. Naturally, he was made like that.
And I thank God for Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. And I thank God for his research and teaching. He's gone on now. So if he was a racist, that went in the ground.
So not only is this in direct, contrast to his own beliefs and teachings via Elijah Muhammad, this is another rabbit hole for the black community. Because Ron L. Hubbard, was a racist. He was quoted saying things like black people are savages. When he went to Africa, he said the Zulus are savages, and the only reason that they're not in a mental asylum is because they haven't built one. He's made, plenty other racist quotes about black people not being intelligent, etc. So not only has Ron L. Hubbard disrespected black people, he's disrespected Islam, calling Muhammad, a small-time booster, and, basically saying that Muhammad founded Islam as a way to scam for money.
Finds this enormous stone hanging suspended in the middle of a room. This is an incident called the Emanator, by the way. And this thing is, by the way, the source of the Muhammadan lodestone that they have hanging down there, that when Muhammad decided to be a good small-town booster in Kansas, Middle East, or something of the sort. By the way, the only reason he mocked that thing up is the trade wasn't good in his hometown. That's right. You read the life of Muhammad.
And so after hearing Ron L. Hubbard talk so viciously not only about black people but about Islam, I don't understand what about him Louis Farrakhan could respect or want to uphold. But on top of that, Ron L. Hubbard, one of the biggest things that people need to realize about the Church of Scientology is it got a good majority of his teachings from Aleister Crowley and Freemasonry, which Ron L. Hubbard admits to knowing Aleister Crowley and Aleister Crowley being a good friend.
He could simply say, I have action. A magician, the magic cults of the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries in the Middle East were fascinating. The only modern work that has anything to do with them is trifle wild in spots, but it's fascinating work in itself, and that's work written by Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend.
And so if you don't know who Aleister Crowley is, Aleister Crowley was literally called the Beast by his own mother. His own mother said he was the devil in the flesh. Aleister Crowley was aspiring to try to be Lucifer in the flesh. He wrote books on how to sacrifice children. He established the Society of Thelema. And Aleister Crowley and Madame Blavatsky, had a big influence on Freemasonry and, the religion known as Wicca. And so with that being said, satanic worship was huge in regards to Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was said to have drunk blood from children's skulls, etc. And this is where Ron L. Hubbard got hypnotic or hypnosis techniques from in regards to Dianetics, etc. And so, Dianetics has been used to infiltrate the minds of people. If you don't know what Dianetics is, it's basically it's a hypnosis technique to where the Church of Scientology infiltrates your mind and they can find out basically anything about you. It's like an upgraded, and technology has been applied to it to where now it's like a highly advanced lie detector test. And they've been used, this has been used to blackmail people, etc. So this is where Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam is trying to usher black people into supporting. And so not only did Louis Farrakhan openly state that he has respect for somebody who is racist, but he disrespected Islam on top of that. So continuing with the Church of Scientology, the cross, that you see people like Rizza Islam speaking in front of is a Rosicrucian cross, a.k.a. a cross of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a.k.a. a satanic cross. So the symbol for the Church of Scientology is a satanic symbol. And so the reason I said it is because the Nation of Islam is supposed to be filled with all of this scholarship. You mean to tell me that you didn't look at that cross one time and see that that was basically a Luciferian cross? And so it's important to note that Rizza Islam was a member of the Church of Scientology before he was a member of the Nation of Islam. And so his convergence and his recent public appearances in the public eye via in representation of the Nation of Islam is only because he got caught by law enforcement for doing dirt behind the scenes for the Church of Scientology. But my thing is this: if Louis Farrakhan was a righteous person, why would you support or allow somebody like Rizza Islam to represent the Nation of Islam, knowing that he is involved in illegal activity, knowing that he's being charged with allegedly committing fraudulent activity, not just on people, but on black youth at that, in regards and in favor and in agenda of the Church of Scientology, which was created by a white man, the same white man that you say is the devil and that clearly doesn't feel too kind about you either. And so, you know, the level of contradictory hypocrisy and just the disgusting nature and morality of Louis Farrakhan is so high that it doesn't even surprise me anymore. But the entire Nation of Islam has been compromised, and at the end of the day, it is used to withhold the evolution of the black community. And if you don't get down with the lay down, if you don't get down with the get down of the Nation of Islam, you've seen they try to make people lay down. But it's important to not just stand up to a bully, but to beat the bully up, okay? Because it's one thing to say, you know, you a bully and I'm just gonna stand up to you, but I can't overpower you. And it's another thing to say, I'm gonna get you out of here because you know the bullying days is over. And so the Nation of Islam has such a high level of bloodshed that it itself spread out of the community up until the point to this very day where they're still attempting to mislead the black community, you know, doing things like leeching off a Nipsey Hussle funeral for, you know, attention and trying to recruit the youth because their numbers is dying and Louis Farrakhan is on his way up out of here. You know, it's a duty and we have an obligation to act as pillars in our community so that thought processes and spiritual processes can actually take place and evolution can actually take place. And the way that you do that is you rid yourself of the blockages. And the Nation of Islam has been, if not the primary blocker of the evolution of the black community, it's in the top 2, not even 3. And so we're here to get rid of one of the biggest blocks that has held us back for almost 100 years. This organization has been here since 1933. It's going to be 2033 in a little more than 10 years. And we have yet to see the fruits of the Nation of Islam versus the destruction of the Nation of Islam within the black community. And so the reason that, you know, this whole conversation is important is because it's an unspoken truth. Once again, bringing it back to what I call a nigger privilege that nobody want to talk about. And we've all been victims of it. I've been victims of, you know, the white man is the devil mentality, etc. And what I'm saying is this: I'm not, you know, what a lot of people are going to do, right? Because when you're telling the truth, it's like exercising a demon out of people. So what a lot of these motherfuckers is going to do is they're going to say, well, why you only attacking the black man? Or are you cooning because you telling the truth about the black man? I'm not saying white people have not done and still to this day don't do heinous shit. I'm not saying that. We see police brutality every day. We see chemtrails. We see cloning, GMO. We see that. But that's not the topic of conversation. The topic of conversation right now is a man who utilized pain in black people due to historic turmoils with white people as a way to leverage that in order to become a higher level of a tyrant. Meanwhile, getting rid of actual black men who really were trying to better the community so that he can act like he was trying to do or is trying to do what they were really trying to do. And so coming back to what I was saying is, whatchamacallit, when you look at the situation, right, I remember when I didn't want to get a job because I didn't want to work for a white man. I remember when I didn't want to do nothing that involved white people because I had such a deep level of hatred in my heart for white people due to this rhetoric. And I remember when I got my reality check growing up, and I said, well, damn, you doing the same thing white people doing, if not worse. Because it's one thing to say, and once again, like I said, this comes back to nigger privilege, where you can do wrong and you don't got to call it out because the person is black. So this weak-ass facade of black unity that don't exist no more is the excuse for me not to call you out on your bullshit. So let me give you another example. Let's say this is what Louis Farrakhan did to the mentality of damn near 4 generations of black men. Louis Farrakhan told black men, the white man is the devil. He imprinted that into your subconscious mind. What you did now is you became so non-proactive in society that now you're not going to go work for no white man because the white man is the devil. You're not really going to get no loans from the banks because it's true that it is racial policy set in place to where you're not going to get a loan. So now what do? You resort to selling the drugs that was brought into your community by the same white man that you was just told was the devil. And so, boom, now you start selling these drugs, and instead of taking responsibility for your actions, or instead of black people coming together and economically pooling like we actually can do, we just blame the white man and say, well, I'm a product of my environment because the white man is the devil, and I'm busting guns and killing other black people, and stray bullets is killing children because the white man got it set up like this. So now what's happening is the white man being the devil has become just as powerful as the devil in the Bible. And what I mean by that is when people do to take responsibility out of their hands for why the world is messed up today, they just say, well, the devil got it messed up and I'm waiting on God. So now take that same understanding and put that in the black community. Instead of black people saying, you know what, let's clean this shit up, let's economically pool, let's support black business, it's crunch time. It's easier to just say the white man is the devil. Oh, I don't take care of my kids. Instead of saying I'm just a bum-ass nigga who don't take care of my kids, it's easy to say, well, the white man is the devil when they got these women out here tripping and child support and family court and blah, 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 and the guns, you know, well, I am busting guns and straight bullets is killing people, but it's the white man programming me with the TV. Well, if you know that white people programming you with the TV, why the fuck is you watching TV? If you know that white people brought drugs into the community, why the fuck is you using drugs? Nobody says, well, I know the hunter put a bear trap on the ground, I'm finna go step in the bear trap, then when it clamped me, well, I'm only trapped because the hunter put it here. No, you trapped because you was aware of the trap and you put your foot in there because you thought you was cute. And so this white man the devil rhetoric has become a fucking national excuse for black people to not step their ass up. And so I have to say this as a black person because I'm the only one who could check my own people. Because other people have done us so wrong, they don't have no right to tell us what we're doing wrong. So me, as a black person who want to see black people progress, who want to see all people progress, who want to see black people successfully have healthy relationships, not just with his own community, but with other communities, I have to tell my people about my people, because I seen this shit and I see it every day. And I'm tired of this shit. Okay? And so my thing is, this type of thinking is trailed by people like Louis Farrakhan, okay? Meanwhile, he's doing the total opposite. And so we the ones in the community waiting on Farrakhan to do something for us like he Jesus. We the ones in the community not going nowhere with our lives. We the ones in the community sitting here, you know, not economically prospering, not physically prospering, not psychologically prospering, because we blaming all of our ills on the white man instead of taking consideration for our issues. And so, you know, let me give you an example of where I'm going. You got free will. You have free will. Yes, life is hard. Yes, white people made it very unfair. Yes, white people gave themselves a head start. But you still have somewhere to start at. There is no excuse for us not to try. We're not even trying. See, people was talking about why we're not succeeding. We ain't even fucking tried. We haven't even tried yet. And so I'm waiting on black people to try. Can we try? And then if we fail, fuck it. Blame who you want to blame. But we don't have nobody else but ourselves right now to blame because we haven't even tried. And we're using, once again, rhetoric such as the white man is the devil to not even try. And so this ain't our land no more, okay? Indians been got deboed. You ain't in Africa no more. You go over there, it probably won't be a friendly welcome how you think. Boko Haram over there stealing 300 girls at one goddamn time. So you better hope you don't run into him. And so the point I'm trying to make is the world ain't the same like it used to be. And so Donald Trump to white people is what Louis Farrakhan is to black people. Don't get it twisted, okay? So when you do this with your hand and you throw up that white power, when you close it and make a fist, it turns into black power. I'm not trying to shoot down black power. I love saying black power, but I know what black power means to me versus what it means to a Freemasonic agent who has an agenda. So it's a difference between me understanding that I'm black, understanding melanin, understanding the essence of the universe, and me understanding the power of that and screaming black power versus a nigga like Farrakhan who's just here to use your turmoils of the past to instigate you into having a race war so that FEMA camps could be enacted, and that they could have you in one of these Walmarts, which is marked law backwards, and have you locked up because you fed into black power. And so this is what I mean by infiltration. It's the difference between loving yourself and then somebody playing you against yourself for a higher, unseen hand. And so when we talking about, Louis Farrakhan and how much of a danger he is to black people. And so, the reason Louis Farrakhan is critical to the black community is because he has the ability to make you believe you finna receive something you not. Hence, I'll give you an example. Million Man March, Justice or Else, okay? We didn't get no justice, but I'm waiting on that or else. Waiting like a motherfucker. Still ain't got no or else. And the body count still going high. And I'm not saying this, you have to get my disclaimer, I'm not saying this like I'm trying to invoke people to confront law enforcement violently, but I'm just trying to show you empty promises, okay? Louis Farrakhan is like that deadbeat nigga you in a relationship with. He keep telling you he gonna change, he keep telling you he gonna deliver, but he ain't. And next thing you know, 10 years done went by, you got 7 kids by this nigga, and the relationship has gotten worse and worse, and the promises have gotten more empty and empty to the point we gotta take the P off the word, and it's just rhymes. And so with that being said, we have yet to see Farrakhan build anything in the community. We have yet to see Farrakhan open up a black-owned bank. We have yet to see Farrakhan establish any currency that is valued by black people. We have yet to see Farrakhan take our issues to the United Nations, which he has the power to do. We have yet to see Farrakhan say any real shit outside of Islamic rhetoric or jargon. And we have yet to see Farrakhan defend a black person successfully from the infringement or oppression of another race, which means since we haven't seen it in damn near 100 years, we're not going to see it. And this is what I mean by clout chasing, okay? He clout chased Nipsey Hussle's funeral to try to, let me give you an example, right? If you outside selling socks and t-shirts, people gonna go drive by you and go to Walmart. They're not gonna support you because they don't love the idea of us prospering together, especially in the black community. But let me give you an example. If you die, people gonna wear your shirt and support you, not because they really care, but because they trying to gain leverage off of the attention that you getting. So the Nation of Islam, they didn't give a damn about no Nipsey Hussle, but since it was a high-profile death, now they want to be in so much support because they really just trying to gain leverage and attention off the level of support he's getting by saying that they mess with him. So it's like you've been putting out mixtapes all your life, putting out music all your life. Your family, your friends, they don't buy your shit. Your shows in your hometown ain't doing numbers. As soon as you die and you pop off or something happens to where you being mourned and you getting an excessive amount of attention, now you everybody friend you as their man, everybody playing your song. And really what they doing is they trying to get leverage energetically off of your situation. So the reason I'm bringing this point up is because Nipsey Hussle, they say, was the first rapper to get a chain of Malcolm X. The Nation of Islam killed Malcolm X for exposing pedophilia, okay? So they say that Nipsey Hussle was killed by telling an unrighteous man to get away from him. So do you think Nipsey Hussle would have let Louis Farrakhan speak at his funeral? No. You think Louis Farrakhan would have let Riz Islam speak at his funeral? No. You think Louis Farrakhan would have wanted them niggas marching around his store? No. And so it's funny how the Nation of Islam can come support a celebrity to try to leverage off his situation, knowing that they wicked as hell. But where was the Nation of Islam for Sandra Bland? Where was the Nation of Islam for Corinne Gaines? Where was the Nation of Islam for any black person who has died within the last 100 years? I have yet to see the Nation of Islam respond physically to black people being oppressed by non-black people. And you will never see that because that's not their agenda. Their agenda is to, specifically Louis Farrakhan's agenda, is to placate on the pains of black history as a means of continuing to gain support from black people, meanwhile doing nothing for black people or convincing black people to do nothing for themselves. Let me hone in on this last part, importantly. It's nobody's job to do anything for you. I don't like when people be like, well, where's a leader? You know what I'm saying? We got people that think more healthy, I'm more in a healthy state than others, so I can understand the leader aspect there, you know, as far as psychological and mental health goes, but it's your job to do for you. But Louis Farrakhan is not even telling you the truth for you to be able to do for you. And so, you know, I'm going to break down, once again, what influenced this documentary. What influenced this documentary is to take a stand that black people need to take. Black people need to know who is and who is not for them. We need to stop being afraid of being shook up and being put in, non-comfort zones, because evolution only comes when you become uncomfortable, okay? And so we comfortable with the fantasy of black power to the point where we allow a snake-ass bastard like Louis Farrakhan to be the face of that fantasy, okay? And so when we get to that level of lowness, where we will just allow anybody to act like they could represent us, we disrespecting ourselves. And so my thing is this: it's a lot of people who qualify to represent the black community. Louis Farrakhan is not. Louis Farrakhan ordained the murder of Malcolm X in the defense of a pedophile. You are not qualified to speak on black people, because no matter what you say a white person did or how much devils you want to sling at white people, you want to sling that word at white people, you in the same bracket. You're in the same bracket. And so, my goal at the end of this video is not to have people so much in an uproar towards the hidden history of the Nation of Islam that they forget that all I'm trying to get you to do is become the captain of your own boat. Think for yourself, and just like the movie said, get that hate out your heart, or else you'll be just another nigga. And so I understand that quote beyond, the average person, and I hope that after watching this documentary, you can too. And so I want to end this documentary with a special form of love and admiration for Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Sebi, and most importantly, Malcolm X. And so this is the revenge of Malcolm X towards the Nation of Islam vicariously through me, I feel, because the Nation of Islam's entire agenda in regards to the homicide of Malcolm X was to make sure that that story about Elijah Muhammad never got told. And so today, in 2019, I'm making sure that that story gets told. And so I got my Malcolm X on today, all right? I got my X's on because I want the energy of Malcolm X to be as present, in this documentary as it would be if he was actually sitting right here next to me. And so with that being said, many people are going to be liberated internally by this documentary. There's many people who've been wronged by the Nation of Islam, been beat up by the Nation of Islam. Most people only join the Nation of Islam when they go to jail. That's just the truth. Then come home and, either join the NOI or don't never speak of it again. But not only do I want people to feel liberated by this documentary, not only are a lot of people going to feel liberated by this documentary, a lot of people are that demon in them is getting exercised when it's presented with the truth, and it's going to start fighting back. And so people going to get to slinging words like, oh, you a coon, or you a sellout, or, why you exposing the Nation of Islam, expose the white man. Like, nah, I don't live next to the white man. I live next to you. So don't tell me to ever make a secondary objective a primary objective. It's kind of like when people say, well, why you talking about R. Kelly being a pedophile? Talk about Elvis. I don't listen to Elvis. Elvis didn't come on my damn radio. R. Kelly did. He's primary because he has the ability to affect my household and affect me. Elvis can't affect me. Louis Farrakhan got the ability to affect me, my children, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins. Donald Trump don't got no effect in my household, okay? And so it's important that we keep our immediate influence around us pure. And Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam is a toxin to that purity, and it is time for the black community to understand the evil history of the Nation of Islam and detox the Nation of Islam from our community. And with that being said, family, I love y'all. Peace.
They would have fed up to some crocodiles. Who was set on homicide? But that's not about nothing. Less than 60 years later, I got us right back jumped. And we did stop, but that ain't about nothing. They killed Malcolm, but I got us back jumped. And real hip hop, that ain't about nothing. They killed Pop, but I got us back jumped. Come talking crazy about my people,